The White Chalk of Days, the Contemporary Ukrainian Literature Series and Anthology. So this is an English language version, since I don't speak any Ukrainian. I can't even read any Ukrainian. It's a hardback edition. This is the spine. And this is what the book itself looks like. It's just a decent binding, I suppose. And it is a compilation of poetry and prose coming out of Ukraine from different writers from the last 50 years or so. So it sort of straddles, or it's really just a little bit before the Soviet era ended, and then after the Soviet era ended. And so it's sort of like a marker in time of the kinds of poetry and prose coming out around that time. That's not to say that every piece of work in here is specifically about that time or speaks to that kind of time. It doesn't. They don't necessarily. It's not like they're all saying, oh, and this is what it's like in post-Soviet Ukraine or something like that. Anyway, I have read some of it. I have some of the poetry especially spoke to me a little bit. One of them, it had nothing to do with being Ukrainian. I don't have any Ukrainian roots myself, though my family came from other neighboring East European countries 100-something years ago. But there's some poetry in there that talks about it's a Ukrainian who doesn't live in Ukraine anymore, and what it's like sort of being the face of your country when you're out. So you have to sort of thinking about everything you say and do, because are they thinking, oh yeah, that's what Ukrainians are like? Well, I face some of that as an American living overseas. I've lived a few places overseas, in Korea for about a year, and Israel for half a year, and like some other places, and here in Australia for some time. And I recognize that sense of, well, when they hear my accent, they know that I am American, and they already have their preconceptions about America, and then will I fit those, or will I explode those? Anyway, let's have a look at the table of contents here. And to me, these are all new names. It's all new work to me. I don't know really any Ukrainian writers, and that's why this book fills a gap for me. Oh, there's the one I was just talking about, Robbie Williams. The poem mentions the singer Robbie Williams, but the poet is in Poland, I think, as a Ukrainian. See, if a Ukrainian came up to me, and I do know some Ukrainians, but I don't know enough to have built a stereotype about them. But in Poland, Ukrainians, anyway, judging by that poem, there are stereotypes about Ukrainians, and he feels that. Really interesting, therefore, to me, that because it's different for me, and these are not writers that I'm familiar with, they're stories that I'm familiar with, or poems that I've heard of before. So this is for me really sort of an interesting book to have and to look through and to read. I haven't read everything in there, and I'm looking forward to reading more. I will say just one thing about the book itself as an object. It's heavy. It's not a thick book, but it feels really, really heavy and maybe dense for its size. And I think that has something to do with the paper, which is a nice thick, it's a very thick paper. And and I think that it must be a dense kind of paper, because it's really, the book itself just feels thick. And maybe it's they've done that because they want to have, as you can see, it's done in a very pretty way. Well, to me, it's very pretty. And they've got the pictures of the authors and everything, and the sort of graphic there. It's nice as an object as well, and it's just got sprinkled throughout, some poetry and then some prose. It's really well done. Okay, so I can recommend it. The White Chalk of Days, Contemporary Ukrainian Literature Series Anthology.